What is up, y'all? Dan back at you with another video. Today's video, I wanted to start a small series that I've been talking about with my stream for a very long time, and that is just a guide to tell you how to solo flawless every single dungeon in the game. Now, I know you probably have seen this a few times, but I'll be doing a series for each dungeon with each subclass, well, not really each subclass, but with each class, Hunter, Warlock, and Titan, and showing you how to do it. And more than likely probably about a half an hour. Some of the later dungeons about an hour. And I think it's important personally for me to walk you through how I think about these dungeons, how I do them. Now, all these videos you're probably going to see are recorded while I'm live, so I'll have a few cuts here and there because there are a few times where I just stop you like moving for a few seconds and talk to chat, or do other things, thanks follows and all that. So for the most part, I'm just going to walk you through some short commentary, show you what I'm doing and why. Now, if you like this series, if there are certain dungeons or characters you want to prioritize, as always, let me know in the comments, and I'll also post a dim link to the build. Most of the videos that I will do will not be using solo operative. Just a personal preference. That also makes it to where it'll be useful even past that date, but it'll also put into context, if you have also operative, you're gonna be doing even more damage. Now, what you're probably seeing is the opening of Pit of Heresy. I wanted to start with this one because this is the one that I find people have the most difficulty with. With the Solar Hunter, you're gonna be running for the most part Sunshot the entire time. Sunshot is really good because of the AoE. Solar Hunter is really good for the damage from Blade Barrage and from Golden Gun and Nighthawk. And you also have healing, you have a debuff, restoration is phenomenal. I'll leave a dim link in the description if you want to just rock what I'm rocking and using the exact same stuff. The second thing is I also really love having a sword just for movement. You can use the new Slammer sword. As long as it has eager edge, not bad. You don't need to do any fancy stuff like Well Skate or Shatter Skate or anything like that. Nope, just a very simple, swing and just keep it moving. Third thing is you want to have a blinding grenade launcher. Every single enemy, with the exception of the final boss, can be blinded in this entire dungeon. So blinding everything with a blinding grenade launcher allows you to have the freedom to roam around and not die. So if you have a Pardon Our Dust, you can go craft it. I personally would prefer to have a disorienting grenade launcher with auto-loading holster. And personally, I would really like to have it with Vorpal, which is what this one is. So this is not an optimal round. This is just me just talking to chat and just running through this. Personally, for this opening, I think Assassin's Cowl is phenomenal. As you can tell, you just toss your melee and you will go invisible. I will also leave up a little description if you're confused about the routing of this. Generally, I like to go around and clear out all of the rooms. So when I first came in, I looked at the 3 symbols. Then I spend time going to each location, clearing out everything except for the boss you have to kill. Now, you could also not do that and just go from location to location and worry about picking up the sword. I generally just find it easier to go around, clear out the entire area, and then go grab a sword. Blade Barrage is really good, and I would just keep Blade Barrage on until the final boss. At the end of the dungeon, at that point, you can put on Nighthawk. But until then, Blade Barrage is great. Nothing is going to live from it. Especially in the encounter that really has people scared most of the time, which is the Suffering. Be very careful going up these elevators because there's a very big chance that you will get some type of physics thing that will put you one shot. So whenever you go up them, try not to move. Try to make sure that you're full health before then, because there's a very big chance that you will, almost die to that. Most of the time, I will come in here with the Shrieker and blind the two guys and blade barrage them. But I'm just talking to chat, just kind of vibing out. As you can tell, because I didn't do what I normally do, you know, that happened. But in theory, you can just blind them and then deflect all of these Shriekers' shots. And then we're gonna move on. I'm pretty sure we go down to the division sign. Yeah, we go down to the division sign and deal with the next one. And of course we deal with the wizard. The wizard is the one that probably will get you killed the most because of what my chat likes to call the fart cloud. And that fart cloud can be very, very annoying, but as long as you move away from it in time, you should be fine. Also, when you have super, you can press your super button with the sword, and as you saw, it'll do a big chunk of damage to the wizard, which is really, really nice. And then we move on to what I believe is ice cream. All these guys I like to kill. Having radiant is always really good, and also having restoration is always really good. Occasionally I will try to get a new sword just to make sure I don't have to have a new one. This guy just fell off the map. Chat thought it was hilarious. But normally you can just kill that guy after you kill after you use two swords. Generally I go get a new sword just so I don't have to get a new one later. Especially if you haven't used most of the sword already, just go ahead and get a new one if you haven't dealt with the might of the blade yet, which is the shielded knight that we have to go deal with now. Now, as you can see, there's not a lot of sense of urgency. You know, most people will probably struggle with mapping out this location, but one thing that people probably need to think more of and pay attention to is your radar. If you go to a location and you see active stuff on your radar, then you know you're going into the right direction. Generally, you're gonna go into the direction of one of the three locations or a location with one of the knights that drops the sword. So a lot of times I'll just run around until I see active like red lines or dots on my radar to let me know where I'm going. But you can always use a map if you really want to speed run this. And this is just me just casually having conversations on stream and just running through it. If you really want to, there's a couple optimal straps I can show you. If I, when I do my next one, I can show you that if you really care. But if you just want to be in and out in half an hour and enjoy your time without much stress, this is all you really need to do. And remember, once again, whenever you have the super, it works on both the knight and works on the wizard. It doesn't work on the shrieker, I think, but I've never really tried. But that shrieker can be very deadly in a short time. Once we get to all three, of course, we have to kill the guy in the middle to open up the door. And if you got a super, you can pop it. Be very careful with that because there is the issue of getting self-inflicting damage from the blade barrage. So you want to be careful that you don't get too close to blade barrage in that situation. There you were fine, but just something to take note of with blade barrage is if you toss it into a bunch of enemies, you will take self-damage from it. Now as we move on to the I guess hide and go seek area, the route I use is very, very simple. It gets you in and out in about a minute or so. And if you follow the route that I take, then you should have no issue knowing where to go. There's a very simple route I take. I go through to get to each location. It allows me to not waste too much time and not get seen a lot by the ogres. Because even at this point, the ogres can knock you off the map. They can kill you. They can blind you, all that stuff. So you want to come down here to the first one. And you're going to get the very first orb that you need to dunk. Of course, you have the enemies in here. Clear them out. Again, we are not trying to go super fast. We're just, you know, working using Sunshot. Sunshot clears out everything. And of course, Sunshot will extend our restoration, which is beautiful. I like to pick up a restoration fire sprite right before I leave. And then I come out that hole with the orb and go all the way over here. Now this hole that we just passed is where we're going to get the next orb, but since we're coming this way anyway, we're going to first dunk the left charge. And that one's done. Now what I like to do is I like to come back inside this hole and hide for a second, just to de-aggro from the ogre. And when we come out of this hole, the section that we skipped by is our next one. Jump right through, and now we have the second of 3 knights that we're going to take. And then we're going to go out the other side of this room, hit that up, and now we're at the middle. Dunk that, and then we turn around, and we're going to go straight ahead right here. And as you'll see, we have our third and final knight. We grab it, we go to the other side just like the previous orb, come out and dunk it. There is a fourth one. If you somehow mess up, there's a fourth one. I can show you a route for that as well if necessary, but doing this allows you to have minimal time outside of the, you know, sections, and otherwise you're just moving on. Now after we have done that, we get rid of the sword and move on to the curse, the suffering, I think is what it's called. And if you'll notice, I put on a machine gun, and that machine gun has a demolitionist and adrenaline junkie. Mainly we put this on for a demolitionist, just so we have another healing grenade. And this is probably the only place that I should probably clean up a little bit more, but I think it's more than enough for this time, as I was, of course, just playing around. Blade Barrage is always fantastic for these guys. Also, machine gun is really good on these guys as well. Once you dunk it, you always want to take out the 2 guys up top because they hurt even at this light level. And then we just sit here creating Sunshot, restorations, fire sprites. And also getting orbs to drop so we can have more recuperation healing. And at this point, it is up to you. There's a couple of strats you can do for this. This one I chose to do all 3 of them. However, technically, you could, in theory, just wait it out until the right and left one spawn. They're on a timer. So if you wait here long enough, even though there's one in the middle, there will be another one that spawns on the right or left. But for now, I just went ahead and went up there because just talking to Chad, and I think we're fine. But if you do not feel comfortable coming out here, or if you're worried about the timer, the Curse of Suffering timer, feel free to kill him and not pick up the orb, and then it'll move on to the next one. Only mistake I made just from like answering a couple questions on chat was forgetting to pick up a couple fire sprites, and it almost gets me one time, but even then you can see Sunshot kind of solves that issue pretty heavily. And then of course I pick up that for recuperation. Another note, if you really have that issue, you can always put on, I have on currently Gambler's, I think Marksman's Dodge. You can run Gambler's Dodge so you have a melee to toss. That's another thing to note. And as always, we just play Barrage. Now that orb you can just drop, you don't have to dunk it yet. That orb doesn't go away for I think about 5 to 10 seconds. And there are 6 orbs you need to dunk. So sometimes if I'm speed running, I'll just do left, right, left, right, left, right. And you only have to go left and right 3 times each. And the rest of the time we get spent building up my super most of the time. And remember, because we're using Assassin's Cowl, we finish and we're good. And of course nobody knows where we're at, so they just kind of stand there. And remember to always be on the plate when you're around here, just so you don't have the curse of suffering stacks popping up. Gamer's Dodge is nice, really nice here because of, you know, not having to reload in that situation. Even though I personally really like Void here, I think Void is unnecessary with the Invis stuff because you have Assassin's Cowl, and I think this is phenomenal, especially for folks who don't feel very comfortable using different loadouts. I think you can take this one loadout and change the heavy weapon, and you'll be fine this entire dungeon in no time. You don't need to have the machine gun I'm using. I just prefer it because I like Demolitionist a lot. Just gets me closer to another healing grenade. Some people prefer Commemoration, which is also really good. You know, by the time you're seeing this video, we might be going for Hammerhead, which is going to be also really nice. Which is funny because Hammerhead was the very first machine gun I used for my original solo flawless of this dungeon back when this dungeon first came out. So that would be kind of nostalgic as well. Before you know it, we're done. Outside of one little area where things got a little sketchy just because I wasn't paying attention, there's very little time that you're having many issues at all. So here's a bit look at the weapons I'm using currently. Of course, you can see corrective measure with Demolitionist and Adrenaline Junkie. And stats don't really matter. 100 resilience is all I really cared about. At that point, we're going back to the sword just for movement, because this area can be a little bit sketchy. Even at this point, you know, if you don't focus up a little bit on your movement, that can be a little bit sketchy. Because of us using Sunshot as well, we have plenty of heavy on the ground because of how exotic hand cannons and exotic primaries are. So feel free to swap weapons and heavy, and you'll be able to pretty much be topped off on your sword again after using the machine gun. That change is really nice, which helps a lot. Here I almost died because I just didn't pay attention. Don't read chat when you're running these. And don't forget to land on these platforms. For a long time, no one really knew that those platforms on the outside you could stand on. So feel free to stay on each set and move on. So then we look at these. I call this hands up, ice cream cone, and tiki. Just because it looks like a tiki hut. Just like the previous ogre section and just like the opening section, we move based off of the radar. So there are some areas that I just know where they are. But if you're ever curious where to go, if there's red on your screen, that means there is an active wizard near that location. The only enemies that spawn in this section are ones that are coded to be spawned near a wizard. So if you're going somewhere and you see nothing on the screen, that means one of the 3 wizards are not in that location. So sometimes I get asked a lot of times where people say they get tripped up on where they need to go in this section. And even years later, I say the same thing. If you see red, you're going the right way. If you don't see red, you're not going the right way. Especially for a couple of these sections that have hidden areas, you have to jump around, jump through and all that. Feel free to just take your time. Feel free to use stompies. Feel free to use lion rampants, heat rises. These sections are all about just getting to location safely. You don't have to be a speed demon for this. Just take your time on these jumps. A lot of times I'll spend time watching it go up and down and looking at the environment for a long time before I make my move. And just make sure you know how to move throughout this section without dying. And of course, practice makes perfect, but the best advice I can always get is follow the red. So that's the first one. Here, once again, I almost died, but Eager Edge saves you, you swing right back. And at that point, I just take a moment, not read chat, and just watch the movement of both of the items. And then we safely make it across. Same thing here. Line up our jump, and you're good. One thing to note is that, which is funny, we had this discussion on stream while this is happening. People were talking about how they feel like they need to have heat rises or lion ramparts or stompies to make these jumps, or eager edge, and none of those are an absolute necessity to make every jump in this dungeon. Some of them make them easier, but they are not a necessity. So if you feel like you need to run stompies for this, feel free to, but it's not a necessity, I promise you. As you can see, the wizard's blinded. So no need dying there if you can blind him. The wizard and the final boss can't be blinded, so that's unfortunate. But everyone else at this point, every single enemy has been able to be blinded. So as long as you have a blinded grenade launcher, preferably without loading, you should have no problem taking care of everything without having too much threat coming behind. Once again, I feel like I have to keep, saying this thing over and over. Take your time on your jumps, as sometimes you'll notice that I come out in third person while pulling out the sword, just to have a better field of view of where I need to go. Having more information on the screen is always beneficial. So no reason not, going third person just for jumping. And of course, we're seeing the red, which means right in the middle right here is where our final one is. Personally, I like to open up with a blinding grenade launcher shot all the time, simply so I can shoot them before they shoot me. Because even though they don't hurt, if 5 of them all shoot you at the same time, then that will hurt, like this. Also, I would always focus on taking out the wizard. Once you kill the wizard, every other enemy in that location de-aggroes and then despawns. So if you have to prioritize killing the other hive or the wizard, kill the wizard first. Because everyone else instantly stops shooting you, and then they, a few seconds later, will despawn. So the only thing that has to go down is the wizard. Everything else is just to stop from dying, so. At this point, there is probably something that I don't see a lot of people do in the dungeon at the end, and that is how you can deposit all 3 orbs wherever you want them to. And I'll show you what that looks like here. At this point, we've only changed one weapon, which is our heavy weapon. This time, we're going to be changing off of Blade Barrage and putting on Nighthawk. And of course, Nighthawk is just really good on bosses. So instead of using Blade Barrage, we're just going to put on Nighthawk. And the only other thing we're going to change is our heavy from a sword to a grenade launcher. Cataphract is what we're going to use here. We thought about using a rocket. We thought about using other stuff. But I think with Edge Transit coming out very soon, I think this is a much better choice to run with. More people will have Cataphract, and more people will probably have a much better role when that comes out. Once again, this is all without solo operative. So technically, this would have been even faster if you were, which you probably will be, using solo operative It just so happened that I didn't have it on because I was doing a bunch of non-solar stuff beforehand. And even then, some of the solar stuff on the artifact I didn't even have applied. So this stuff could be even better. You could have more healing, more damage buffs, and more ignitions going off just running everything if you had optimal solar build going on for Hunter. So take that for what it is and run the optimal stuff if you like. If you don't feel like running solo operative for whatever reason, you'll have the same benefits as I do. So at that point, I've cut the video a little bit because I talked to chat for a while. At this point, we're just running Cataphract with Nighthawk. And then since I don't have an Envious Assassin, what I'm going to do is just activate bait and switch, fire it, and then, you know, Marksman's Dodge for another magazine. And of course, once again, we're still using Pardon Our Dust. Still can blind everything except for the boss here. What I will be doing here is always focusing on the biggest guy first, personally, which is the Knight. The Knight gives me the most issues just because he can't be blinded and he fights back and all that stuff. But with Healing Maze and Restoration, most of the time I'm waiting for my super while putting out some not really tick damage, but some passive damage for a little bit. And then once you kill him, I would leave it. And then we're gonna move to the next one, which is the Shrieker, which is what we did at the beginning of the dungeon. Same 3 enemies. Now you'll notice that that orb is still back there, and we're gonna leave that be for now. And now we're gonna go over to the Shrieker and do the same thing to the Shrieker. Of course, we want to keep our restoration up as often as possible. And then we'll leave that orb as well. And then we go over to the Wizard. Now you're probably wondering why we leave them, and in a second I'll show you what happens when you leave them all down. I guess I can say it now. Leaving them all down will allow you to grab all the orbs at the same time and dunk them wherever you want to. The beauty in that is you can go wherever you want and dunk them without having to fight with any of the other enemies around. Especially if you have to run away from the knight or the boss. You also can have control over where the Zulmak will be, since you don't have to go at each location once. Unless you want to. But just like previously, what I like to do is I like to clear out all 3 mini bosses and then deal with everything else. So then we take this one, and generally I like to go away from him and then counterclockwise to dunk these. And what you'll notice, you'll see 3 icons on the screen. So all 3 orbs have respawned. So technically, I can go to any of the 3 locations and dunk the orbs. And what'll happen is every time I grab one, all 3 will respawn again. So if you can't get to one, if you're not comfortable enough getting to one, you have the option of going where you want to go and dunk these. So go across. As you see, 3 icons on the screen again. Every time we dunk one, so you have the 3 locations at all times. We like to activate Radiant before we go in. And remember, if you have Solo Operative on, you'd be doing even more damage than what I am. Only downside is you don't have another debuff, but that is fine. If you really care, you can take off the healing nade and put on another way, like a knife or something, or like an actual grenade to debuff him again if you truly care. Or just put on Solo Operative, and this is not an issue, you know? You don't have an issue in all of that, but Solo Operative causes this to be a 1 phase, so. But because they're not, we're going to do 1 more phase, and it's pretty much just a Nighthawk, so. But it's rinse and repeat. As you see, no one's going to really hurt us. I'm going to blind them. And this entire time, I'm just hanging out with chat on my Twitch stream, talking about, I want to say anime at this point or something. Maybe, I think actually we're talking about sports, you know. Just not even really thinking much about it. Not even going hard. Just, you know, playing the game. And you can be done in no time. One thing is worth mentioning, that if you really don't have a good cataphract, then a bait and switch rocket is just as good. Only downside is ammo, but if you're running Solo Operative, that doesn't matter. Either way, it's going to be a 1 phase of this. But I would probably say, and this is probably controversial, that the boss of this dungeon, this phase, is by far the easiest part. As long as you don't panic and take your time, and you use, if you're a hunter main, use what I'm doing here. This really doesn't require you to do any loadout swapping, no weapon swapping during the encounter. I know not everyone is really comfortable with that stuff, even though if you get used to it, you are. But if you aren't comfortable doing all that stuff, you don't have to really swap anything mid-encounter. And you don't have to even swap anything but 1 single exotic helmet once. And you're heavy twice. And this is pretty much the same for this dungeon with all 3 classes. This is one of my favorite dungeons, but this is one of the dungeons that I find has the least swaps necessary to get this done. All you gotta do is just take your time, save your healing aid for this guy, clear him out. And once again, we're gonna grab this 3rd one and dunk it, which will then trigger the other 2, really all 3, to spawn as well. And then you can just pick and choose where you wanna go and which one extra you're gonna drop. One thing to note, that if you try to grab the same orb 3 times though, what will happen, which is kind of a good thing but also a bad thing, is that it will cause Zulmak to almost have an infinite damage phase with an area that is damageable green, where he will plant his sword into the ground and try to wipe you. And then after that, about 10 seconds, he'll plant his sword into the ground again and wipe you again. And he'll keep doing that over and over for I think up to 3 times before he actually stops. So that's just something to note if you choose to say grabbing the orb only from where the wizard is every single time, no matter what. Just something to note, be aware of. If you see him do it twice, just be careful of that. that is pretty much everything you have to do in this dungeon. Just us taking it slow and easy. Hopefully this video helps you. I'll be making one for the other two classes as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.